The drilling tool itself needs to be extremely strong as well. And I always make people aware, be careful where you're buying your drilling tools, because a good tool can make a bad rig look really good and a really good rig look really bad. Piling rigs are basically vital in creating deep, strong foundations capable of withstanding heavy axial and lateral loads, ensuring long-term stability over time in varying ground conditions. Choosing the right piling rig for your project is extremely important, because it could influence the success not only of that project, but it could actually influence the success of your company and whether your company is still going to be around next year or not. I'm Mike the Broda, and this is TerraQUIP Talk. After years of providing drilling equipment solutions, I know that a project success hinges on reliable, high-quality rigs that meet your needs. So if you're ready to make smarter equipment decisions and build stronger foundations, let's get started. Welcome back to my podcast. My name is Mike, and today we're going to be talking about something that I've been meaning to do for a long time, and that is talk about something basic for maybe people that want to get into this industry or people that are looking to study civil engineering, and that is, what is a piling rig? It's actually quite funny, but a while back I was at an event, I was at a party, and I started talking to a stranger, and he asked me, he said, yeah, so what do you do? And I said, piling. I work in piles. And he said, are you a proctologist by any chance? I was like, no, why? He said, you said piles, hemorrhoids. I was like, no, piles are in the piling industry in construction. Like we drill holes in the ground and we fill them up with concrete and we insert cages and we build foundations for buildings. Oh, right, okay. So there you go. This could be a useful episode for that. All right, so what is a piling rig? Actually, there's a lot of people that still don't know what a piling rig is, and this episode is gonna shed some light onto that. So a piling rig is a piece of heavy specialized equipment that's used to install piles in the ground for the purpose of building foundations. They're basically advanced machines designed for precise installation of deep piles, ensuring stable support for large structures such as bridges, skyscrapers, roads, highways, you name it, even in challenging soil conditions. Piling rigs are basically vital in creating deep, strong foundations capable of withstanding heavy axial and lateral loads, ensuring long-term stability over time in varying ground conditions. So, what other purpose do piling rigs have? There, of course, are other purposes for drilling large diameter pile holes in the ground, sometimes for building shafts, such as ventilation shafts or mining shafts and so on. And I actually have a little bit of a funny story, but believe it or not, in some places, in some parts of the world, and even in Melbourne, there's a cemetery where piling rigs are being used to dig holes, to dig the graves, and to bury people vertically. So what they do is they drill about 1.2, 1.5 meter diameter hole down to about 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 meters, and they insert the coffins standing up with people standing up. And I know it sounds crazy, right? But there's two reasons why they do that. Number one, of course, is real estate. Like, land is expensive, so it's a cheaper way of doing it. It's a cheaper way of digging like that, rather than have someone with an excavator and digging a rectangular hole in the ground. And secondly, there's a symbolic reason, and that is because they do that for people that have been in a wheelchair for most of their life. They've been sitting down, and then they bury them standing up so they can stand up for eternity, right? It's quite beautiful, and it's interesting. But yeah, piling rigs can have so many reasons. In other parts of Australia, they dig for opal mining. So what they do, it's actually called bulk sampling. They dig the hole, and then they sort through what they're digging, and then whatever they don't need, they put back into the ground. I was actually part of a really interesting project in South Australia in an area called Puchera, where we were digging for kaolin. We're doing bulk sampling with a piling rig. So we're drilling 900 and 1.2 meter diameters down to about 40 meters, and every single, dig between 15 and 40 meters, we're using that. That was pure kaolin. Actually, it just so happens that South Australia sits on one of the largest kaolin deposits in the world, and we were part of that project. It was really interesting. Now, what do I mean? Because I've mentioned earlier large diameter pile. Why do I mean by large diameter pile? I mean, for diameter, they are between 450 mil diameter and up to 3 meters wide, and that's considered large diameter pile. Then we have the micro drilling, which is from 300 millimeters and under. So anywhere between 30 mil and 300 mil. So there's different categories of piling rigs there. Now, what is a piling rig composed of? Firstly, a piling rig is, you gotta understand, is very similar to a crane or an excavator when it comes to the actual base. So the base machine includes a crawler, a turret, and of course the cabin. There are of course machines that don't have a cabin, such as our little Marini MRP 350, which is a remote control low headroom drilling rig. A really cool unit. You gotta see it. Then we have the connection between base machine and the drilling mast, and that connection can have different shapes or configurations and can be called a parallelogram or a boom system. And it's actually quite an interesting story. The parallelogram was invented by an Italian man back in the 70s because he was not happy with the way the machines were being transported, because before the 70s the machines were transported with the mast laying in front and they were occupying a lot of space. And in order to make them more compact for transport, this gentleman came up with this idea called a parallelogram that allows for the mast to be moved back, to be transported with on the way back. And also what it allows to do, the parallelogram allows to maintain the verticality as the mast is being vertical, moved away or towards the tracks. So it's actually quite an interesting invention. I would say it was a genius invention in our industry, and it's worth mentioning. Then of course we have the boom system, which is more like the excavator boom, where the drilling attachment connects to the machine, but then the boom doesn't maintain the verticality. You see, as soon as you boom forward, it actually tilts the entire mast, and then you have to reposition from the jib again. And it's a bit more technical, but anyway, we move on to the next components from a piling rig, and that is the winches, which are located sometimes on the base machine or on the mast. There is of course the rotary, which is the one that turns the tool, and the crowd cylinder, which is the one that applies the force onto the tool, the Kelly bar, and of course the winches. As I mentioned, they can be three types of winches. They can be the main winch, which is used for the lifting and lowering the drilling tool into the ground. There is the auxiliary winch, which is used pretty much like a crane, although you're not supposed to use a piling rig as a crane. And then there is the crowd winch. Then we have the mast, which is the drilling mast attachment, which is a very important component, and it's usually composed from it usually has 5 points. There's the lower mast or the foot. Then there's the main piece of the mast. Then we have the intermediary mast and the upper mast or the cathead. So these 5 pieces, they compose the mast, and the intermediary mast is the section that can be taken off and convert the machine from the normal drilling mast attachment, the standard height, to a low headroom attachment. Then we have the Kelly bar, which is this tubular telescopic structure that acts like a conduit between the drilling rig and the drilling tool. This element is used to transfer the torque and the crowd force or the downforce from the rotary table to the drilling tool in order to excavate the material in the ground. The Kelly bar is telescopic, so it has multiple elements. I'd say minimum 3, up to like 9 or 10 elements in some cases, depending on the configuration. And most commonly used is 4 elements. And these elements can expand as you reach deeper into the ground in order to excavate the material. You see, the Kelly bar is a very, very important component of the entire piling rig due to the amounts of forces that are being exerted on it. I mean, if you think about it, it's the middle point, is the intermediary between what happens in the ground and what happens above the ground. And I actually have quite a funny story. It was I think it was the first year that I started working, and I had no idea how much a Kelly bar. I was working as a sales manager, and I had no idea how much a Kelly bar costs. And I remember clients saying that he wants to buy two Kelly bars, and what would be the price, if he buys an extra Kelly bar. And I said, oh, don't worry, we'll just throw it in for free. You buy this machine, and the client looks at me and goes like, are you sure? Do you have any idea how expensive Kelly bars are? Little did I know, of course, it was something like over $100,000 for a Kelly bar. I was like, oh my God. Thank you for for warning me, for teaching me something. Then we have the cabin on the base machine, and most piling rigs have a cabin or a cockpit, as they call it in Formula One or aviation, where the operator sits comfortably and controls the machine with the buttons and the functions available. Now, how does a piling rig work? You see, a piling rig works by using a large structure to push and rotate a tool into the ground, most commonly using hydraulic power. But of course, even at TerraQUIP, we have machines that are powered by air. They're pneumatic air. For example, our Marini skid-mounted drilling rigs, which I think they're the most popular. It's our best-selling. I think we sold over 50 of them in the last 4 years or 5 years. So in short, they can be powered, piling rigs can be powered by hydraulic power or pneumatic power, air. As the piling rig, the drilling that needs to be strong, the drilling tool itself needs to be extremely strong as well. And I always make people aware, be careful where you're buying your drilling tools, your buckets, and all your accessories for your tool, because a good tool can literally make the difference between a good tool can make a bad rig look really good and a really good rig look really bad. So be very, very careful with where you're purchasing your drilling tools and what design they are. Okay, we spoke a little bit about hydraulic. Now I want to touch a little bit about the electronics and the software systems, because nowadays the hydraulic systems are controlled. The entire rig is actually controlled by a software with the help of a computer through a management system. And there's different schools of thoughts here, in regards to what people like. Some people, especially the newer generation, they like the more heavily electronic based machines with a lot of softwares and a lot of gadgets. Some people, I'd say generally the old school people, they like more the simple rigs that are just hydraulics over electronics, and they're basically machines that don't have a lot of things that can go wrong with. Because as I said in one of my previous points, downtime on a job site is extremely expensive and can be very, very hurtful for the company and for the people involved. So a careful evaluation of the ground conditions for your job can allow you to select the right rig for your job, depending on the ground, depending on the budget, depending on the tools that you have, and of course the human resources you have in place. Just quickly, need reliable drilling equipment for your next project? At TerraQUIP Drilling Equipment, we offer tailored solutions with top-tier support to meet your project needs. Contact us using the links in the show notes to find the perfect equipment for your drilling project. Now back to the episode. So just to give you an example, our IMT machines, I like them a lot, although I'm, let's say, considered a new generation. I like them a lot because they're simple and they're hydraulically controlled. I mean, you literally just have a little joystick that controls what we call the pilot pressure, which then goes to the main control valve bank, which then sends the oil to the actual component that you need to action. So I like them because they're extremely easy to fix, they're extremely easy to diagnose, and they don't give us many headaches. But of course, that's just me. They're also the heavily computerized machines that they literally act like a PlayStation. So you move a joystick or a button, and then that transmits an electrical impulse to a system, then opens the pilot pressure valve, and then that pilot pressure valve sends the hydraulic signal to another control valve bank, which then communicates with the system again in order to double check itself. So there's a lot of electronics in the process, there's a lot of sensors, there's a lot of circuits, and in my opinion, there's just a lot of things to go wrong. But of course, I'm not saying that the rigs that are like that, they're not really good rigs. I'm just saying this is what we've been extremely successful with. This is why our clients love us, and this is what allowed us to sell so many piling rigs over the last 7 years that I worked with IMT. Of course, the project that you have the rig and the projects that you're targeting will help you determine what rig you need best for the job. So just to give an example, a lot of the transmission line guys, they prefer the IMT machines because they're more simple and because they drill in remote rural areas where it's really hard, for us to send technicians, and they need to be kind of like self-sufficient. Whereas I feel like people that drill, for example, in Sydney, they prefer a different brand, it's more heavily electronic, heavily computerized, because if something happens, it's only half an hour away to get a technician, and look at it and get them up and running, I guess. So it really depends on the kind of project that you're drilling and what you're trying to achieve with your piling rigs, and of course the budget that you have in place. In terms of automation and safety, as I said, the mono rigs that are heavily computerized include a lot of automated systems that monitor the load, the depth, the vibrations, enhancing the safety and reducing human errors in some areas. In other areas, operators rely too much on them and they can create more harm. However, what we've noticed with IMT, our operators like to have the feel of what they're doing, want to communicate a little bit better with the machine. And this is what they achieve by having a hydraulic control rather than just a fully electronic machine. So while electronics are great for machines, I feel like where we like to employ electronics is when we're monitoring the drilling capability, the drilling parameters of the pile. So not necessarily to monitor the rig itself and to control the rig itself, but to control and to monitor the parameters of the pile. So for this, we still use the IMT machine, which is hydraulic over electronic. It's very simple, but then we employ a different computer that deals specifically with surveying, analyzing, recording, sharing the pile parameters. So what happens in the ground. But it cannot influence the controls of the rig. So you can still use the rig regardless of what the computer does. Another thing that I would like to touch base on is in the last 15 years of selling drilling rigs and drilling and piling rigs, who did I sell to? So there's a series of companies that have use for piling and for drilling and piling rigs. And first of all is, of course, the specialized drilling contractors. That's their bread and butter. That's what they do. Then, of course, is the civil construction companies that are looking to get into this game and start their piling division, their drilling division. Another one is, of course, the mining people, that use them for large diameter shafts for piling projects. Another one is for the people that work in the transmission tower industry for the electricity. Other people are the people that do bulk sampling, so they need to drill large diameter piles into the ground and excavate that material and send that material for analysis. So they could be quite a varied, let's say, application for piling rigs. Therefore, there are a lot of companies that have different, let's say, objects of activity that could require, and I have sold piling rigs in the past. So choosing the right piling rig for your project is extremely, extremely important because it could influence the success not only of that project, but it could actually influence the success of your company and whether your company is still going to be around next year or not. So people, I guess, people come and go, from different contractors. You can always find new people and employ new people. Drilling tools, they're not that expensive. You can sort of purchase them from different manufacturers. But a piling rig, you're stuck with it. It's really, really important, for the companies that choose to purchase a piling rig to buy the right machine. And I'm actually going to dedicate an entire episode, if you want to join us for the next episode, where I'm going to be talking about how to purchase a piling rig and things to have in mind when procuring one. Another reason why choosing the right piling rig and the right drilling rig for your company and for your projects is super important is because you're going to get stuck with it. It's not easy to sell a piling rig. Sometimes it could take 6 months to sell one. You got to make sure that it's the right one for you and it's the one that's going to help you succeed in your endeavors. As a salesperson and as a managing director of a company that sells drilling rigs and have sold them for the last 15 years, I'm always trying to educate, I guess, people. I'm always trying to give them all the information that's necessary in order for them to make the right assessment with what brand to buy, what class, depending on their projects. But in the end, it's their decision. Since I started in this game I had no idea when I started that I'm going to be selling piling rigs. I got the job back in 2011 through a recruiter that then introduced me to someone else that then actually got me to the actual company that I was going to work for the next 6 years. And I had a look on the website when I found out the brand that I'm going to be working for, and I said, okay, it's a drilling rig. I was like, okay. And I just thought they were so impressive. They were just so majestic. They were just so dangerous. They look dangerous as well, you know, and impressive pieces of machinery. And what is a piling in my opinion, as a passionate person in this industry, I would say it's a majestic piece of equipment that's impressive, and it's like super specialized, like no other construction or heavy machinery type in the construction industry. So there are a lot of different models and different configuration and different classes of piling rigs out there, and some of them they're called versatile drilling rigs, and IMT is one of them, right? You got to be really careful, because a versatile drilling rig can be a rig that's so-called good at everything, but it's actually not good at anything in particular. So while versatile rigs exist, they do often compromise on performance in specialized tasks. And experts know that tailored equipment yields better results. And a lot of the IMT models are tailored equipment machines specifically designed for harder materials and hard rock, like difficult ground conditions. So there you go, guys. This was the episode, What is a Piling Rig? I love talking about this. I think it was a great episode, and I hope you find it informative. I'll see you next time for another episode where we're going to be talking about tips on how to purchase a piling rig. Thanks for tuning into TerraQUIP Talk. If you enjoyed this episode, the best way to support us is by leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And don't forget to subscribe on YouTube so you never miss an episode. You can also find out more from me on all social media platforms. The links are below. Until then, remember, if it's not turning, you're not earning.